called him back.
Morning, this is Grafton Sterling.
Good morning. We're going to call the board to order. We'll have the pledge of allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is a special one-subject meeting, and therefore we'll dispense with public comment at the beginning of the meeting. We'll still have public comment after a motion is made, and we'll still have public comment at the end of the meeting. You're up.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking time to meet today as we wrap up the year. At our last meeting on Thursday, I was asked to send up a short summary, a comparison of rates, and then just a one-page summary of the different coverage options. And if I might, when the notice of non-renewal was sent out 9 days ago, we had a minimum hope to get coverage. We had a higher goal to try to keep us inside some kind of public entity program, a program that better understands who and what you are and the coverages that you need. Although many of the carriers that do work nationally did pull out, two have come through that are recognized as leaders in the public entity insurance field nationally. Both are rated A+15. That rating is a AM Best rating. There are a number of services that rate insurance companies, from Fitch to Standards and Poor to Moody's. AM Best is one of the industry standards for how we rate insurance companies. A+15 means that they are superior in how they conduct themselves as an insurance company. It also means they are stable financially. I do want to point out that the coverage listed as option C, which is the employment practices in the D&O, is an A15, which means that it has an excellent rating and also financially stable. So all three of the carriers that we're talking about today have very high marks in our industry. You should all have a premium comparison, and then you should have 3 sheets attached to that talk about each proposer. Let me start, if I can, just by going through some of the premiums. What would be nice is if we could kind of pick and choose, because if you look at the rates, you'll see that the liability and the umbrella rates with proposer A are significantly under proposer B. We can't do that. It's a package. You buy it as a unit. They won't allow us to separate those out. In looking through it, what I would suggest is that proposer B, who has higher liability premiums, is more sensitive to our past activity, to the news media, and moving forward, if we go with proposer B, that would be one of the areas where we would want to push hard next year to try to get rate relief in the general liability and the umbrella piece. As you scroll down the page, you'll see that an important exclusion in proposal A is for earthquake and flood. Proposer B does have earthquake and flood for a limit of $5 million, and I think that's an important consideration and a driving factor on why we're recommending proposer B. If it meets with your approval, let's go to the support documents, the one-page flyer on each coverage, and I'm going to break those down a little bit and try to make them make good sense. The format that we're under today is different than special districts. The format we're on today is an insurance series of documents known as ISO, Insurance Services Office. So both of these policies, the foundation of the coverage is a standard form, whether it's the commercial liability or the auto. Each of those are a standard industry form. So we look at building up from that document. The important things to note between Proposer A and Proposer B, the Proposer A includes a thing called failure to supply, if we failed to give water. In this state, because of your immunities, we've never seen that as a claim issue. We do have some practices in place here at the district that mitigate potential claim. We carry about 3 days of water, always in reservoirs, and we have contracts with our neighboring water suppliers. So the failure to supply is not a major concern. It is a coverage that is offered under Program A and is not available under Program B. In talking to the attorneys and working with the Proposer B, the concern about failure to supply is limited because of some immunities, discretionary immunity and some other immunities that you have. Other than that, the forms are significantly similar. They both start with a ISO format and build up from there. An endorsement under the general liability is a piece called employment benefit. This would be for the benefits of our that are provided for our employees. The difference between A and B is that there's a higher aggregate limit under A than under B. If you scroll down to the umbrella policy, I want to point out that we throw out the term umbrella, but the truth is these forms are what's called following form. So the coverage is exactly the same above the general liability as the general liability form, so it's consistent. True umbrellas actually broaden some coverage to pick up some areas. This is not a true umbrella, it is a following form policy. Proposer B offered $5 million. In their original quote, they offered $20 million. Today, in front of you, they have a $5 million umbrella over a $1 million underlying, and Proposer A has $4 million over a $1 million. So Proposer B has a little more coverage, $1 million over Proposer A. Also note that under Proposer A, there is a coverage called cyber liability. We have a quote out to Proposer B to get it. Let me explain a little bit what cyber liability is. There are two coverages under cyber liability that are noteworthy. One is called first party and one is called third party. Third party would be a suit if someone penetrated our systems, our computer systems, and pirated credit cards, pirated lists. Traditionally, you see this with for-profit companies where somebody hypothetically gets into the Macy's list and the Macy's credit card number to misuse those. And obviously with our immunities, because we didn't cause the action to happen, we're somewhat isolated from those types of claims, but also the data that we keep is somewhat isolated from a third-party claim. The first-party claim would be a claim where somebody got in, tampered with our system, potentially planted a virus, and that would protect us. That limit is low. That currently under Proposer A is $50,000, and that piece we are pursuing a secondary quote. We do have some coverage right now for data and media in the proposal. As you scroll down further down the page under the auto liability, it's also a standard ISO form. It's a commercial auto form. There are three things we look for in that form because those two forms are the same. There are three things that are critical to look at. Coverage is triggered by what's called a symbol. The insurance company has several dozen different symbol options that they can give on a commercial auto policy. The best symbol for liability is what's called a symbol 1, any owned auto. Most insurers, and in the case of Proposer A, you have to list the policy. If the car is not listed on the policy, there is no coverage for it. Public entities, because of how they operate through boards and how they purchase, it's not uncommon that as we phase out vehicles, we buy new vehicles. It takes a month or two to work through the system. And I prefer the symbol 1 because it doesn't have any gaps or holes. Symbol 1 means if you bought it, you're covered for it for liability. So that's the best symbol. We have that on Proposer B. We do not have it on Proposer A. Proposer A has a symbol 7, which is a listed vehicle. The other two things that we look for in the auto are the deductibles. Proposer A has 500 for comp and collision. Proposer B has 500 and 1,000. So collision deductible is slightly higher under Proposer B. The third thing we look for under auto is how we insure those vehicles. It is industry standard to insure them as actual cash value. So if we total hypothetically a 2005 van, what we're looking at getting back is a 2005 van, not a new vehicle. The reason that I point this out, although that's industry standard, special districts did insure our vehicles for replacement cost. It's not a big concern with a 2005 van. It is a bigger concern for me with a very expensive dump truck. If we lost our Volvo, one of our newer dump trucks right now, we get roughly the same year, same make, same type. I prefer the replacement cost, but not available with either Proposer A or Proposer B. They're going to be, those vehicles are going to be insured a lot like your personal vehicle. That's industry standard. I do like the better coverage when available. Let's scroll down the page to property. And this is really one of the most sentinel purchases in the program. Proposer A only offered $70 million. We had requested $91 million. We also requested it be a true blanket. The reason we want a blanket with no co-insurance is it means that the chance of us being penalized with a loss is significantly reduced. The blanket allows us to state that we have $91 million of coverage, so if we had a total loss here, and on the schedule, if for some reason this was slightly misinsured, underinsured, we have the blanket to protect us. So at any one loss, they will pay up to $91 million. It's our job, working with manager and staff and with the insurance company, to make sure we insure to value, but we do have a true blanket. Under Proposer A, we have a partial blanket. All of our reservoirs and wells are on an actual cash basis on their stated value. Now, I want to point out that some of our reservoirs are older, and on an actual cash value, some of those reservoirs would be significantly depreciated if we had a loss. So from a coverage perspective, the property piece under coverage B is significantly better. Also under coverage B, we do have the earthquake and the flood. I do want to point out that the earthquake has a 5% deductible, SDO had a 2%, and our flood has a 1% deductible. Also under coverage B, we have full equipment breakdown. It's not for wear and tear of our pumps, but it would be for electrical arcing or some of the other shock type losses that can occur to some of our equipment. The importance there is if you make a trip down to the plant, you'll see some very expensive electronic gear, in particular our SCADA system that routes and reroutes water. A lot of value is in the electronics. Most of the plant has been updated. We still have a little bit of wiring, 2 boxes in particular that go back to 1960. Everything else has been updated and is in very good shape. But that piece is one from a risk management perspective that we look at very carefully. We want to make sure that we have the broadest type of coverage for our equipment that we possibly can. I'm going to shift down now to C, if I can, which is the employment and D&O. This, on the surface, because the premium is going to look like a gift, I'm going to point out a couple of points that are important for you, but it is not just 2 separate policies of employment practices and directors and officers. This is actually a public officials management and employment practices program. So it picks up your exposure as directors and officers. It picks up also the employment practices of hiring and firing, and some of the other key discrimination areas that we look at. But it was specifically designed for public agencies. This premium on the premium page looks quite modest at $5,805. It's $5,100 plus taxes and fees, which take it up to $5,805. But I do want to point out a couple of things that are very important to note. Some of the fringe coverages that were offered under special districts of ethics and ethics defense, they can't pay the fine, or OSHA coverage and some of the other items are not on this policy. That's where we had the activity in past years. But also in this carrier's document, and I want to stress this with for-profit insurance companies as a whole, their exclusions are much tighter. And in the case of the employment piece here, they're very strict with anything that would be considered outside of your duties and scope as a board member or an employee. So they're going to be much tougher on anything that would be considered libel or slander. They're going to be much harder on misconduct, deliberate acts, dishonest acts, other types of errors and omissions as board and employees. So I'm going to recommend that we be very careful in that arena. With that said, the policies in front of you, both Proposer A and B and Proposer C, are nationally recognized. If you were in another state, it would be a very common policy for you to see. These have significant market share across the country. They are truly public entity programs, which is a good thing. A couple of things that we look for in public entity programs. As a public employer, the named insured is critical. It goes far beyond just naming a business if it was a for-profit business. The named insured needs to include our board, our volunteers, our employees. The named insured is the key element of public entity liability. In addition, I want to point out that everything you do as a board is called an intentional act. Every time you vote, you're taking an intentional act. It may have unintentional ramifications. Insurance companies that don't work with public entities don't get that, and they absolutely exclude intentional acts. These carriers do not, unless it's willful, wanton misconduct, criminal, so on and so forth. So before you are good options. My recommendation, because of the earthquake and flood, is to consider option B, and C would go with either one of the other package options. Very short summary. Questions, concerns, things that I can address for you to help with the decision-making process?
We'll get to that a little later. Before I accept the motion, just tell the public that you see that we're referring to them as A, B, and C. We're going to try to get this insurance binded this afternoon, whichever one we accept. And tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, you can call Mr. Moore, and he'll give you the official name of the insurance company. And to keep from having any interference or anything, we're just not releasing that until tomorrow morning. Okay, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we accept Proposer B's proposal.
Second.
And then I have questions when we're ready.
Okay, under discussion, you direct any of your questions to Mr. Griffin.
Thank you. There was a difference in the terrorism quote. Could you address that, please?
Please. The terrorism under Proposer A is including the premium. We can back it out. We can get that number and back that out. In Proposer B, the total terrorism is 2201. In one of the support documents that was sent out, the ultra expanded coverage, it shows 18 and some change, but the actual, when you add all the lines together, is 2201.
Okay, thank you. What can we expect as differences in coverage or business practices between, in this case, Proposer B and SDAO?
Thank you. And probably one of the most important questions that we need to address. Philosophy is different. The association program starts, their entire contract starts different. What it says is we embrace the law. We embrace what's called Oregon Tort 30.260 to 30.300. That's what frames up almost all suits against an Oregon public entity, with the exception of federal suits and contract suits. So the philosophy with special districts is you have coverage unless it's excluded out. For-profit insurance companies, most of what you're going to see across the nation is totally different. It starts with an ISO form and it builds up. So the assumption is that we need to find coverage there rather than it is there, find the exclusion. With both coverage A and B, but specifically under B, what I want to point out is our exclusions are the critical element that we want to look at. Conditions, warranties, and other parts of the policy that limit our coverage. The big ones are going to be any kind of intentional act. All policies exclude a number of things from war to nuclear, mold, mildew, some of those items. But the key issues we want to look at and drill on very hard with our liability would be an intentional act of misconduct.
This, I may have to direct it to the general manager.
Okay.
Should we be setting aside, or have we set aside monies to cover our deductibles?
Mr. Chairman, as I looked at the policy, I think that all of the deductible amounts are something that we can probably cover under our existing operations, although I think as we go into the budget cycle, we may want to be a little bit more sensitive to that.
Two more and I'll be done.
Okay.
Now that we're in the private market, what will we have to do differently as a board and staff to avoid cancellation?
Thank you. Obviously, activity on policy claims or allegations of misdoing in claims would create great anxiety with either of these carriers, B and C, the employment practices piece.
Excuse me, Jeff, if I may, I don't think you're correct on the employment practices and D&O. The only way the policy can be canceled once it's put in place is for non-payment of premium.
Yes, and forgive me, but I was thinking in terms of next year's renewal, whether we would have this at next year's auction or not.
Well, I'm thinking about January 1, 2013, and that's where your information needs to be correct.
Okay, thank you. And what I'm going to suggest moving forward with staff and board is that we be very aware of how a claim could be denied, deliver statements of misconduct, dishonest. The slanderous type of issues would be probably our biggest concern with getting future coverage at the end of the policy term.
And then my final question, as we all publicly know, if the board issues settle down, and I think you may have addressed this a little bit in your presentation, but if those board issues were to settle down, do you think by next year we could see a reduction in rates? Because we seem to be looking at approximately a $63,000 increase in rates compared to our previous policy. Deductibles may be lower, but that's still $63,000 out of pocket.
Yes.
And it would be nice to see that go down.
Absolutely. The number one area where we're going to have the most impact in reducing rates is going to be general liability in our umbrella. That's where the rates are significantly higher. You're not aware of this, but there was an appraisal done of property 3 years ago by a group called American Appraisers for Special Districts. We're set to do a re-look at those values. Every year we do look at those values. But with technology the way it is, our main plant, we think there may be some reductions in value of the main plant because of some change in technology. There may be some refinement there with limits, but the real savings is going to come out of the general liability and umbrella. That's where the premium needs to be saved.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
Actually, I have a question for Hugh. I'm sorry, for Ken. Was your motion to accept only B, not B and C? Are we only discussing B at this point in time?
since C, my assumption, and I can correct that if we need to, but my assumption was that C would be included simply because it has to go with either of the policies. If you want to make that as an addition and make sure that it's clarified, that's fine.
Well, I do think that's critical, so if you would,
I will accept that as an addendum to the motion.
okay, do you accept that as a second?
Yeah, great, good
Now we
point.
can talk about both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I received the material that I sent out to all of you late yesterday afternoon. I got the summary earlier, and I got the policy forms that were provided around 4 o'clock, and then I discovered that the odd pages were, or the even pages were missing. So it took a while and a number of phone calls, but finally got what you have in front of you here. And it is of general concern to me that we were not given more coverage information. As Jeff says, with the exception of the D&O and employment law liability, these are standard industry forms. And presumably, the insurance carrier would have provided Wilson Hartford with at least the form numbers. Now, those form numbers have not been provided to us, so, nor have the forms. So, with the exception of the limited information that we have here, we really don't know what the coverage is. We don't know what the specific deductibles, et cetera, are. So, I frankly think that that did not comply, at least with my request for information. And as we get into the employer's liability, or the employment law liability and the D&O, you'll understand why that's so important. The form that we have here, and you all have a copy of it. I'll go to my own here because I got tags on it. On page 5 of 23, if you want to take a look. This is coverage C. And I sent you all everything last night, so you should have this. Got it? Okay.
Go ahead.
Page 5 of 23, under L, which is under the definitions, the insured means, and drop down to the second paragraph of sub 2. It says, the term that provided that insured shall not include the following boards, commissions, or units, or any officials, directors, members, or employees thereof. Schools, airports, transit authorities, hospitals, nursing homes, housing authorities, port authorities, or any type of utility company, unless otherwise provided an endorsement attached here too. Now, we don't have an endorsement that says they cover us as a utility. The coverage may be there, but I don't have it. And that makes me more than somewhat uncomfortable. There are other aspects. As you will recall, I had requested a copy of the proposal submission. This particular policy, which is critical to everybody sitting here and all of our, at least all our management employees, requires or states that if there was any misinformation provided either to this carrier or any prior carrier, which goes back a long time, effectively all of those applications become a part of this policy. So I know last year I was very concerned because our, at that time, SDAO it's called best practices, but effectively it was a renewal application form. For the board was filled out by someone and it was never brought to the board. So, and to the best of my knowledge, this year, this board has not seen any of that information. So, everything may be fine, but we don't know what has been reported. And that covers an extremely broad range of issues. Let's see. Other practical issues from the board's perspective. If you move to page 4 of 23, down at the bottom, J, employment practices for wrongful act.
I mean,
Well,
are
okay.
you asking a question of
Well,
someone so that we can get a
Yeah,
response
so,
before
no,
we
what
get to the
I'm
next one?
telling you as part of our discussion is that there are pitfalls in the information that's been presented to us.
It seems like Mr. Griffin would be the
And
person
so,
to respond to that.
you know, and, well, Jeff can reply to them one-on-one if you want to. Go ahead.
Sure, if you.
About the exclusion for utilities.
Sure, absolutely. Right on the deck page, Clackamas River Water District is named. It is properly disclosed to the carrier, and you are properly covered as a public utility district.
Well, it specifies an endorsement, and we don't have the deck page. So we don't know anything beyond what is right here in front of us. And this goes into, and you can answer the next one, perhaps this is better directed to Mr. Moore. On page 423, J sub 4, breach of any manual of employment policies or procedures issued to the insureds by the named insured. Back in December 2011, the board turned over policy-making authority and responsibility for personnel to the general manager. So far as I'm aware, and it required that when any changes were, or any policies were put into place, they would have to be brought to the board. Well, I haven't seen anything. I don't know what was delivered to the insurance company. Jeff, can you tell us what you gave them?
I don't have current policies. I don't know how much they have changed. This policy doesn't have the best practices requirements the special districts did.
I understand that.
But, you know, we forwarded up the budget and all claims history and completed a court application.
So the question then, or the issue for the board is, do we have that information? We may inadvertently violate something simply because we don't know about it. And if we do, you know, we have a problem. So, okay, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah. First of all, we have employment policies now. We have revised our employment policies. As you're aware, the board is a special class of employee, and those particular policies would not apply to the board as employees.
That's not what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the board knowing what personnel policies actually are.
I was getting ready to answer that, Commissioner Holloway. As soon as we get in cycle, we have completed updated policies that will be presented to the board. And you know, this is the third meeting that we've had, and those are one of the things that's in queue to be brought to the board for your information.
Well,
And I would assume as long as the board is not directly involving itself in employee practices and policies, then the board is working within the scope of its authority under a general manager form of government, which means that there wouldn't be a violation that would be an issue as far as the insurance company is concerned. Where we would get in trouble would be if we were to go below you and involve ourselves in employee practices, then we would be out of line.
that's not what the policy says.
I
Policies.
believe that's
The standard practice.
the standard practice with a general manager form of government.
Keep going through the characters.
Okay, so, there was one other that was of Retro date. We don't have any information about a retrospective date.
Yeah. Special districts is an occurrence form, so there is no retro date with this. This policy starts fresh January 1. Prior acts, SDAO is an occurrence form. The deductible will apply. The fringe coverages, the ethics and the OSHA and some of those are gone. But because special districts is not a claims made, that retro date, we don't have a retroactive date, nor will this carrier pick up prior acts.
Okay, so you are stating to us unequivocally that the SDAO policy that will expire 12:01 a.m. January 1 is occurrence coverage, so that, and so that's the question one.
The fringe coverages expired, the ethics and some of the other pieces. All the rest of the policy with special.
Well, we didn't have that last year anyway, so that's irrelevant.
All the rest of the coverages with special districts are on an occurrence basis. And the sentinel takeaway here with this carrier is we cannot get them to go retroactive. They're not going to pick up prior acts.
Okay. Now the
Mr.
second
Chair?
question is this.
Well, I just had a question. Then litigation that began in 2012, and it might extend over
Yeah.
to the 213, that's not covered?
No, that SDAO will continue to.
They will continue to cover?
Absolutely.
But there's a question beyond that that you need to have an answer to. If a claim is made for an occurrence that happened within the SDAO coverage period, and the claim has not yet been made, will SDAO honor that claim? If it came in March 2013 for something that happened in July 2012?
Okay, and as you know, it depends on how that claim is framed up. I can't answer unequivocally that all claims will be covered. But certainly if there's an auto liability claim or a general liability claim that comes against the district, the policy that was in force, SDAO, is on an occurrence basis. So those latent claims triggered by the date of the occurrence would be under the SDAO chapter.
So, but my concern right now is with the D&O and employment law coverage. So, you're confirming that as far as SDAO is concerned, policy is concerned, that is occurrence coverage covering anything that happens up until the end of their policy period, which is 12:01 a.m. January 1.
Yes, and this policy, we can't get a retro date.
Okay, no, I understand that. But if we have occurrence coverage expiring and the SDAO would pick up a claim made post January 1 for an occurrence that happened within SDAO's coverage period, then we don't have anything to worry about, right?
Well, it depends on the claim. You know, I can't unequivocally say that every type of claim
Well,
is going to be covered.
If I did something heinous on July 1, 2012, I don't know quite what, but just assume whatever the worst kind of, thing I could do, in a commissioner capacity under the D&O, and somebody who took offense at that decided to sue me and or CRW in July 2013, and it was a clear and isolated event, would the SDAO policy respond?
And that's exactly where it's impossible to answer that question. I don't know what the heinous event would be. Their exclusion stand, the policy was an occurrence-based form. So when it comes down to an occurrence that occurred July of a year ago, whether it's an auto impact or a slip and fall, that occurrence chapter will stand and defend the actions brought against.
But I'm talking about, let's say employment, where we as a board discharge someone in violation of an employment contract, for example, and which hasn't happened, but let's use that. That makes it a very good example. So if that had happened and there was no claim made until after January 1, would that still fall under the SDAO policy?
Pat, and I'm not trying to skirt the answer.
That's all right.
It's an occurrence form based. And if it's a covered peril, it's going to be covered under that occurrence based form. And so a hypothetical is, especially in those issues, especially with the employment piece, are impossible to give you a blanket answer. I wish I could.
Can I, maybe I can piggyback on that a little bit, just ask a question related to that. Assuming that circumstance occurs, if I understand what you're saying correctly, SDAO would look at that and they would
They would
decide
determine. that
whether or not they want to cover it or not.
Exactly.
Whether they would or wouldn't, you're not able to answer that directly because that's basically a policy decision of their own.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's a more succinct answer.
Further question?
Yeah, it does look like under this policy form, under the non-monetary relief
Yes.
portion, that there actually is
Some limited
defense coverage for bully claims, OGEC, that kind of thing. That's the way it reads to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether they pick up all bully type claims, but just so you know, liability is normally triggered because we've wronged somebody, hurt their property, or hurt them financially, causing injury. It is not uncommon for public entities to be sued for non-monetary damages, where they want you to change what you're doing. They don't want money, they just want you not to do what you did, change your behavior, if you will. There is some limited coverage for that non-monetary relief. On page 15 describes how that works.
Question on page 7 of 23, the definition Q, personal injury. Means the following: when alleged against an insured by an entity or person who is not a past or present insured or applicant for employment with the insured. Does that mean just of this carrier, or does that mean someone who has been on the board previously, for example?
Well, nothing previous would occur there. And are you looking at 723Q?
I'm looking at Q under definitions, personal injury. I mean, as I read it, there's the time question, but as I read it, it appears to me that if one of us or somebody within the organization wanted to sue somebody else in the organization, that there's no protection. If
That's a good question.
yeah.
Gator suits between.
It is a good
Let me ask.
question, yes.
Let me find out for you.
Okay. And then,
Prior acts is not going to be covered under
Right,
this.
I
So
understand.
past
Yeah, but-
is
but-
irrelevant.
yeah,
Traditionally, policies don't allow you to sue yourself. So
yeah.
the issue would be, you know, if,
But this is a particularly interesting definition. And then on 8 of 23, under U 3.
What page, I'm sorry, what page?
I'm sorry, 8 of 23.
Thank you.
This again, definition U, premises. Let's see. Let's see, on that page, when you get down to, after 1, 2, and 3, and you get to premises, does not include any building, facility, or the real property owned, rented, or leased by or under the management direction of any individual or entity other than the named insured. We lease out a part of this building to the vets. And,
And we're not gonna defend the vets for their
right,
employment practices. If they fire somebody, that's theirs.
okay, but but if anything happens relative to the portion that they occupy,
It would be the general liability, the coverage B document. If we had liability for the premises, would be protected there. Anything to do with their hiring and firing practices, how they run their business is not going to be covered.
but relative to the board, because that's what we're talking about, in terms of any lease
No,
arrangements
no,
with them, et
that
cetera.
would fall into general liability.
Okay. The 11 and 23 under exclusions, there is defense coverage only for non-monetary kinds of complaints. Non-monetary under employment law would be something like an employee who didn't get a promotion or who wanted to be reinstated, for example.
It might
Simply
be
put back in
monetary.
their job, wasn't demanding any money.
There might be monetary there too. They may ask for revenue that was lost while they were terminated or on suspension. They may ask for back pay. They may ask for promotion pay or whatever that may be.
Right. Well, if that's, when that happens, it kicks back into the rest of the coverage, so it ceases to be non-monetary. What I just wanted to check on was the reservation of rights wording there. Because if an insured if there is an admission, a finding, a final adjudication, et cetera, that then CRW would be, or whomever the insured is judged to be here, is obligated to reimburse the insurance company for those defense costs under this clause.
And I'm sorry,
The exclusion?
yeah, would you restate that, please?
Yeah, it says, the exclusions, applicability exclusions, to any specific insured may be determined by an admission of such insured, a finding or a final adjudication in the proceeding constituting the claim or in a proceeding separate from or collateral to the claim. If any specific insured in fact engaged in the conduct specified in exclusions
Right.
A1, 2, through 3, such insured shall reimburse the insurer.
Exactly. In the case of reservation of rights, sometimes we don't know whether the exclusion will stand or not. For example, misconduct. So an insurance company may start down the defense road, but later learn that misconduct did occur, and at that juncture, they're not obligated to move forward, but they're also not obligated for the past dollars. So if in fact we're operating illegally, broken a state statute, they don't know that up front, and they may start the defense, they may take a reservation rights and start the defense. But if it turns out that you were in violation of ordinance or law, they have the opportunity to immediately stop and immediately seek restitution for what they did.
And require repayment. And
Absolutely.
SDA will have the same provision.
So again, that it boils down to staying within the scope of our authority as board members and not stepping outside that level of authority. If you stay within the scope of your authority, then you're not at risk.
Well, not
Am I
necessarily.
correct? That authority is pretty well defined in a general manager form of government, as well as the policies that we have on hand in the manager's contract.
You haven't been
Okay,
around
thank you.
CRW very long. Again,
Long enough.
under exclusions on page 14 of 23, exclusion 14, sale of securities, the sale or offering of securities, et cetera, or a debt offering or debt financing, including but not limited to bonds, notes, debentures, and guarantees of debt. Does that include if we default on our bond debt covenants?
You're not going to pay for default. If you default, don't pay it, they're not going to pay for that.
Right, but that's what I was
So,
bringing out.
yeah, no,
okay.
nobody would do that.
Okay,
If
so-
you make an obligation to a bank and don't pay it, no insurance company's going to step up and pay for that.
Yeah, so we need to, so
That's the truth.
be very careful not to do that. Okay. Let's see, circulation.
Yeah. Whose point was well taken. If you do find one that will do that, let us know.
Well, no, the point should be, as the auditors are gonna be pointing out,
No, I was just trying to figure out a way to
that
get my
we
house
are,
payment paid
our
for.
revenues are exceeded by our expenses, and that's what gets us into a default situation. Okay, and then, let me just look at this one. Under representations on page 21 and 23, this goes back to my concern about what was presented to the insurance company. Under J, separation of insureds, protection of innocent insureds. 1 sub B. Well, in the event of any material untruth, misrepresentation, or omission in connection with any of the particulars or statements in the application, policy will be void with respect to any natural person who knew or misrepresented. And with respect to the named insured, which is Clackamas River Water, if and only if an elected or appointed official or the highest ranking member of any board, commissioner, unit of the named insured or any other person in a functionally equivalent position within the named insured knew of such untruth, misrepresentation, or omission. So in our particular situation right now, that is Mr. Moore, because the rest of us have seen nothing, right?
I'm not sure I
Okay.
understand what the question is.
And I don't.
Okay, well, if there's no coverage if, relative to us, if our person in charge of this, which is Mr. Moore, has made any kind of a misrepresentation or anything like that on the application, there's no coverage for Clackamas River Water. So
May I
again, the application.
Speak to the question?
Yeah.
Well, so what you're saying, you're accusing Mr. Moore of some sort of malfeasance?
No, I'm not accusing him of anything.
Wasn't that what you said?
No, what I'm saying is the board should have had sight of the application. Because if, in this case, our sole representative, Mr. Moore, provided any information that was other than correct, we have no coverage.
So basically, you're saying he was dishonest in making out the application?
No, I didn't say that at all. I'm just saying, we as a board, I believe, should have had all of that information going in. So if there was a problem, we could have spotted it. We don't know what went in. We have no idea. And, you know.
But with all due respect, I disagree with you. In a general manager form of government, it is the general manager's responsibility to do that. If, in such a case, he does not do it right, then it's our responsibility to terminate his employment. Absent any evidence that he's done anything wrong, I think the question is essentially moot. It is not our job to fill out applications for insurance, and nor do we need to review them. We just have to review and make sure that we're getting adequate coverage for the risks that the organization may have. The idea that you can cover absolutely every little thing in the world that any employee may or may not do, all the way down the line, from the general manager to the bottom of the barrel, is virtually impossible. So we need to generally stick within the policy guidelines. That's all we have to do.
Number one, there's no legal definition of, quote, a general manager form of government.
I would
Number two,
disagree with
this coverage, this particular coverage, is principally for the board and to protect the organization in the event of employment law problems. So, personally speaking, as a member of this board, I'm not comfortable not knowing what was submitted to the insurance company.
And with all due respect, it isn't an issue of our personal comfort or discomfort. It is an issue of following the proper practices in this form of government.
No, it's a matter of a decision of the board under a contract with Mr. Griffin, which says that Mr. Moore is the authorized representative. It has nothing to do with form of government whatsoever. It is simply a contractual issue.
In this form of government, our job is to select the insurance policy that we feel best suits our needs. That's all we need to do sometime this morning.
Now, one further question, and I raised this with Jeff yesterday. I noticed that the property values are identical to the 2000, end of 2000 application. I am not sure how much more value we have at the plant relative to the generator equipment and all that. And so it's good that we have blanket coverage. I just want to be sure that that everything that is there has been picked up, and as it incrementally is added, will be picked up. And when will an appraisal be done so that we'll know whether our total property limit is adequate or needs to be bumped up?
It's a very good question. You don't know this, but on a regular basis, we visit the plant, we do tours. On a monthly basis, we inspect the property. And one of the things that we want to be is proactive. So often in this type of government, a purchase takes a long time. It takes months and months before we buy a new generator. It comes before the board, we vet it out, we look at 3 or 4 different options. And it's easy, because the process takes so long, for someone not to get it on the insurance, which is why we try to be here at least on a monthly basis with the safety meeting, doing regular inspections, going through, re-photographing all of the equipment. The generator in question was added on quite some time ago. And on tape, I should never say off the record, but my belief.
That's an oxymoron.
It does give people problems, yes.
My gut check, and we will know this later as we work with staff, and in the past, SDO bought us an appraisal. I don't know how we'll do that in the future. What I will do is the appraisal forms that we have at our access, which is Marshall Swift. And then we work with 2 engineers that specialize in public works. Oak Lodge Sanitary is just finishing a $50 million plus renovation of their plant. And ironically, although that's the end result and we're the front end result, water versus sanitation, many of the systems are quite similar. For example, our plan is based on gallonage, not square footage. But what I want to suggest is that we believe that, if anything, the plant value may be a little bit high. Concrete and steel have gone up over the last couple of years. Labor has come down. Some technology changes may actually allow us, as we get more data moving into this next year, to make a minor change there. We are on a blanket. We do watch for new additions of equipment, inland marine, new buildings, new values. We like the blanket. No agent should ever sit on their laurels and be comfortable with that. You always need to be vigilant, looking for new purchases, changes. Minor changes can create some significant costs. So on a regular basis, we move forward, re-evaluating those limits.
Well, your contract calls for an appraisal every 3 years.
The SEO contract did, and I don't know
No,
that this
the
one does. I
contract
need to
with
look.
you,
Pardon me?
contract with you.
That you appraise me, evaluate my
No.
services? I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
That you will do an appraisal at least every 3 years.
No, we do
Wilson
not do an
Margaret.
appraisal. Wilson Margaret does not do an appraisal.
Yeah, well,
We're not a licensed appraising firm. We
Then,
give you,
then we're gonna need to find out if that is something that will be contracted out, that we're gonna have to pay for in addition.
we'll give you very
You
good,
probably wanna look at that contract.
yeah, we'll give you very good estimates of values based on other water districts, on current construction costs, on architects and engineers, and a thing called the Marshall Swift. We're not a licensed appraising firm, and I know no agency really.
Well, I would say overall that coverage-wise, actually, I do have one more question. On B, the umbrella is shown as 5 million and the underlying as 1, with some sublimits. Does that mean we have a total of 7?
You have a total of 5 and 1 is 6.
Well, it shows 2 million is the underlying and 5 million is the umbrella. To me, that makes 7.
I think
Then
the
maybe
underlying,
follow by
that
the-
2 million should be an aggregate. It is, it's an aggregate limit. So what you have is 1 million underlying and a $2 million aggregate. So you would exhaust that, you could exhaust that, you'd have two $1 million claims for a total of two separate individual claims.
Okay,
A
so,
single claim would be a limit of 6 million, one under 5 over. Multiple claims.
so really, we have 1 million per occurrence, 2 million annual aggregate.
Yeah,
That's a
and if
little
you look,
different.
the
than
fourth
what's-
line down, it says each occurrent limit is 1
Right.
million. Aggregate is 2.
Okay, so, so we have a total of then 5 on top.
And 5 on top,
Okay, so we have a total of 6.
6. And, yes,
Well, considering that last year the SDAO policy didn't give us any defense for fully OSHA, ethics complaints, et cetera, and we had a $50,000 deductible unfunded on any liability claim, with no cap on the deductibles applicable to multiple claims. We actually have stronger liability coverage in the sense of potential for out of pocket from the ratepayers.
with the exception that C is limited at $1 million.
Say again?
C is limited at $1 million. The umbrella does not sit on top of that.
Right.
So
Yes,
it's
exactly.
possible.
But no, yeah, it, and it didn't before. So, we do have broader coverage. I believe that earthquake and flood have gone up.
We have a $5
substantially.
million limit.
Yeah. Now, you did say you had an alternative market.
We're looking at what's called a difference in conditions of separate earthquake and flood. And the reason for that was to augment A,
Right, I
but that's,
understand
will be weeks down the road. So it's not, it's,
It's moved.
to make a decision, yeah, to make a decision today, B would be the appropriate.
But so you didn't pursue the DIC?
Oh, absolutely, we didn't get it back in time. And the reason is that with the changes in flood zones and changes in earthquake zones, now a lot of carriers are not going from the old maps, they're going from the new maps, and they're requiring elevations, which require engineering, and one thing that
Yeah.
takes a longer time to get those to work.
And all the new inundation maps.
Lee,
Okay.
did you have a comment?
I just have a point of clarification. The generator itself, until it turns regular, is now insured as equipment. And it will not be until the project is completed that it becomes real property. So, and then a new appraisal would occur.
The generator's not going to be
It
covered.
will be attached, it will be a permanent fixture.
It's not considered part of the building yet, it's separate.
But even as part of the building,
It's
it's still machinery.
it's considered property,
Yes.
but it's not, building value, it's not.
Yeah, but it's not real property like real estate.
In kind of piggybacking on an earlier comment or question of yours, obviously appraisals of the full facilities and equipment and everything that we have been done in the past. Just how has that been done? Do you go out and hire an appraiser?
We go out and hire an appraiser.
Okay, that's what I wanted to, thank you.
Actually, SDAO hired the prior appraiser. We didn't.
Any more questions of Mr. Driver?
Grafton, are you there?
Yes, I have just one question. Is the audio okay across this phone line?
Yeah?
Yes.
Looking at the category proposer A as well as B, their property, at what point or will it occur within the upcoming calendar year for CRWF? Will the policy reflect the $3 million approximately that the ratepayers have set aside for electrical upgrade as well as the generator to the plant?
That's a good question. The generator is already here on site. When it becomes attached to the building, it will move from contents from inland marine over into building value. The electrical is an interesting issue. Although we have money set aside, if I remember correctly, to rewire some of the wiring that goes back to the 60s, and it's really only 2 boxes, it's an interesting piece. It doesn't change the building value a great deal, because we need to be up to law and ordinance and code now. So we may put in X number of $100,000 of electrical, but it may change the building value very slightly.
Right, but it will change, it won't change the building value. However, the replacement cost of the new stuff is significantly greater. And so we have agreed value so that we don't have to worry about that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But we do watch for those changes. So, thank you.
Any more questions, Grafton?
Lastly, perhaps it has been explained and I just simply did not comprehend it, but why is there appears to be over $20 million difference in what A is using as a value versus what B is using?
Thank you. We asked for the 91. A didn't provide it. Part of it is on an actual cash basis, but they also wouldn't provide the limits that we asked for.
Is there a statistical probability of CRW having to use $91 million?
On a probable maximum loss, absolutely not. We have so much spread. We have so many different locations with so much equipment that the likelihood of what they referred to in our industry as a probable maximum loss is far under 91 million. But and in this case with B, the co-insurance and the insurance to value, those are properly placed. Could you inch it down? Yeah, and if the insurance company caught you, they'd want to push it back up. They want to be insured to value.
Well, also, if I may step in, there is 100% co-insurance, which means that we have insured to value.
Exactly.
And when you don't do that, when you drop down below a minimum of 80, but sometimes even higher than 80, you start getting surcharged. So you might as well properly value it, pay the premium for that, because if you do have a big loss and you have not insured to value, you're only going to get back under these policy forms a portion of your loss. And that's not what we want.
Well, stop me if I'm incorrect or didn't hear it correctly. I believe that I heard that the latest appraisal for CRW property was approaching or is 3 years old.
It is at 3, yes.
And what possible value would that have been to any of these proposers to have looked at an appraisal of 3 years old?
They did not. The appraiser was done by American Appraisers 3 years ago, and with the changes that have occurred, we have increased and changed limits based on those, and market trending, and then a system called Marshall Swift. So the limit today is different than it was 3 years ago, and I would almost bet completely that when the new appraisals come out, you'll see some changes in valuation.
And Grafton, the limit that's insured now, with the exception of a couple $100, is identical to the value last year.
Well, the issue still presents itself. The appraisal information is 3 years old. One looks every single day, no matter where you do your research, there's going to be continued downturn in the economy, which will subsequently represent a downturn in the value of CRW's property.
Yes, and do keep in mind that real estate value and insurance value are two different things. Insurance value is the replacement. Real estate value would be what we could sell it for.
Yes, I understand. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, and the other thing that's interesting now is that because SDAO had a cap covering all of its insureds, this insurance is ours alone. We don't have to share it with anybody.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. That's correct, Commissioner Holloway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
I mean, it seems better than what we had, generally speaking.
Right, that's an important issue that everyone should be cognitive of and remind themselves as they continue on in this issue as to who we have to share our policies with. And as you've spoken, no one at this point, it's just ours.
Now we're going to move into public testimony on the insurance, and we have two officials signed up. Cindy
I've been set my questions like that, so
Okay.
thank you.
and Warren Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass too.
Okay. Well, everything you did want to know about insurance and everything you didn't want to know about insurance has been covered. Is there any comments from any board members on the motion, which is to accept proposal B?
Well, it's
And
just,
C and C.
it's just like a contract. You may not be interested in it until something goes wrong, and then you are very interested in it.
Thank you for that. I just want the audience to keep in mind that this is a special meeting today, and I've allowed a little more freedom of people to talk back and forth. That will not happen at the next meeting.
Noted, Mr. Chairman.
Everybody ready for the question? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I,
Did you vote, Grafton?
Commissioner Sterling opposes.
Okay, anybody else opposed? Not, the motion is carried, and we'll have a final public comment on anything, if you would like to say something.
if I could just say one thing. I didn't want to interrupt the motion or the discussion, but I certainly want to know who the insurance carriers are. ASAP. We're in a situation where obviously we don't have any choice at the moment, but it's inappropriate for the markets not to have been identified, at least to the board. And in any ordinary kind of insurance process, that would have happened. So I do want to know who it is as soon as information is available.
Thank you.
And a copy of the binder, of course.
Seeing no one public comment, we'll adjourn the meeting.